let's go ahead and call this to order. And we are here for our Employee Benefit Trust meeting. So I believe that's the call to order. Let's go ahead and move to item number 2, the approval of agenda. So could I go ahead and get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Awesome. All right. So we don't have a copy of the agenda in front of us, so we can see what's rocking and rolling with that. So we'll go to item number 3, the approval of minutes. So if I could get a motion for the approval of minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Awesome.
It's like you guys have done this before.
Yeah.
When there's less of you, you're all participating.
Yes.
I feel like I'm doing this match. So we've had a successful approval of agenda and approval of minutes. So we will go ahead and move on to item number 4, which is background and objectives. And a little lost on that.
Yeah, I think that may be an older one, so, because this was our first meeting last year, so we can strike that and move on to number 5.
Perfect, we can toss that one, all right, so let's go and move on to item number 5, presentations. So I believe somebody more qualified will take over.
I've never run a meeting, you're doing great. I've never done that. That would give me a lot of temptation. So for today's material, we're really just going to talk through how we ended up for last year, right? Our plan year ended June 30th. That was kind of the first year self-funded in the books. So we put together the charts very similar to what we've looked at previously, but this will show kind of our renewal recap and what final decisions were made. I know Rob was here in May to kind of talk through some of those decisions, but we were waiting still, even at that time, on a few pieces of information related to particularly our stop loss. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk through where we landed with claims and kind of what we have some plans for future as it relates to mostly employee education and outreach. Okay? So you have presentations in front of you, and then Dennis is going to handle this presentation. For any of you that can see that, good job, congratulations. I probably need to get a vision exam. All right, so this first page here talks through, like I said, our renewal recap. And so as we look through this, it's going to be broken out into a couple of different components. Firstly, our medical plan components. So as a reminder, we talk about it pretty consistently during these meetings. Our self-funded plan is made up of a third-party administrator, a stop-loss plan, the network, pharmacy, all those fun things. So third-party administrator is currently Aetna, and they handle all of the plan administration, customer service, claims administration, claims adjudication. They also are the network that we lease, and we also use their PBM, which is a pharmacy benefit manager. So with that, we were actually under a rate cap with their services. This is one of the fixed fees that we pay monthly, and it's based on how many folks are enrolled, and then the claims, of course, is separately, which we'll talk about. But we were in a rate cap with them, and so there were no changes to the premium that they are going to be charging us. In addition, they gave us some credits, so some funds that we'll be able to access and have already in some cases. $15,000 for wellness to help kind of work through that program. We received another $25,000 from technology funds that were used to implement the ALEX program. If you remember that, it's that employee engagement program to help folks understand their benefits. And then we also, well, this is sort of a wash, but they normally charge $7,500 for us to carve out our stop loss vendor because they have their own in-house stop loss vendor. We have carved that out using the company Matrix, and so they essentially call that a wash. And instead of billing us, they're saying that's your credit. So we just don't have to pay that additional fund to have Matrix as our stop loss vendor. The next component, of course, is that stop loss. That's the reinsurance for our overall program. And the renewal in premium, which is the fixed cost that we pay, was about a 25% increase. We'll talk through some of our large cost claimants and why that is. But we also ended up with what's called an aggregating deductible. If you remember, we talked a little bit about lasers as it relates to our stop loss insurance. And with lasers, that was essentially saying all of our folks are going to be covered on the district cost up to $150,000 for claims. Anybody who has more than $150,000 in claims, the stop loss insurance covers that. We have a handful of folks who the underwriters expect will accumulate far above that 150. And so they laser those people out, basically just carve them out and say those few folks are going to have a higher deductible than that 150. So the district has a higher liability for a few folks instead of the stop loss covering them in full. And they do that so that instead of increasing the overall premium across the board and increasing, or perhaps even increasing that threshold for all staff, they increase it only for the handful of folks that are going to be those high cost claimants. So that's one scenario. With our folks, we have 3 of these here. If you see in where I have a note in lieu of 3 lasers, so we have 3 folks who tentatively would have been lasered out at varying levels: $482,000, $420,000, $270,000. And so, rather than that, over $1 million that we would be on the hook for those folks before the stop loss threshold would be accumulated for them, and before that reinsurance would kick in for those 3 particular individuals. Does that make sense? So instead of doing that, we negotiated with Matrix, our stop loss vendor, to introduce instead what's called an aggregating deductible. And we did have this in place last year at a slightly lower rate. And so essentially this aggregating deductible is set at $615,000. So that means that any of these 3 folks, once they've hit their $150,000 deductible, anything above that will accumulate toward this $615,000. And then once that total, 615, has been met by this accumulation of the 3, then the plan will start to pay. And so basically it offsets 1.5 of these lasers. So it saves the district a couple $100,000, assuming these 3 folks actually hit those extreme claim levels.
And it's the sum of them.
Right, it's accumulated. It's accumulated to the
It's not
615.
one that has to hit it, it's
Correct.
the cumulative of those 3.
Yep, exactly. And I believe we talked about that in the May meeting, and that this just kind of flushes out the final result of that negotiation with Matrix. Any questions on that? Alrighty. And then as far as our fully insured equivalent rates go, which is basically where we decide to budget and pass on any costs to employees, the district just adjusted their budget to account for our 9%. And I'll let Doug talk about that during his turn. But that was adjusted, and just kind of to put that in a frame of reference, some of the statewide trusts this year were giving out increases anywhere from 7 to 14%. And so there are a very large amount of school districts that participate in those statewide trusts that we're talking about: Kairos, Valley Schools, ASBE. And so that was sort of where they would fall. And so we'll look at our claims in a minute, but our claims were higher than we had hoped for the year. And so had we been in one of those trusts, our renewal would certainly have been higher than probably the 9% we were budgeted for. And so, putting in some of these cost containment measures, having the flexibility to make adjustments is really helping to create a richer benefit for the employees without having to really increase costs as much as just do the track. And then on those ancillary benefits, no big deal. The dental went up about 4.5%, and the vision and the basic life rates were at a rate pass, so no increase to those rates.
Can we go back to stop loss,
Sure.
the renewal
Sure.
premium plus 25.19%? What does that mean?
Yeah, the renewal premium is the fixed cost that we pay the vendor. So it's, we have that as the reinsurance, but we have to pay them to have that. And so their rate increased by 25%. It's just the fixed cost that's attached to each enrolled person.
But is that kind of scary that in 1 year it went up 25%?
It seems scary, but you know, with stop loss, we generally see anywhere from 15 to 35% increases. And so it is a little bit higher, again, because of these high cost claimants. I would have liked to see it lower, but knowing that they were on the hook for some pretty high cost payments and were responsible for reimbursements the first year, I'm not surprised to see the 25%. We waited and waited on getting the final renewal from them, because the more claims information we can provide is generally the better. Sometimes it can be to your detriment, but either way, the next year you're gonna kind of get hit with that either way. But I would say that the 25% is about standard, given our loss ratio was about 120%, which we'll look at the claims in a second, so you have that as a reference. But the renewal premium, when it comes to the stop loss, as it kind of breaks down as premium goes, our overall plan is not, the stop loss is making up about a third, or about a quarter of that. The claims are really what's making up the majority of our plan cost overall.
Does it translate into the individual teacher's premium then?
Yeah, a little bit, not by way of 25%. The stop loss premium is included within our within our premium that the district budgets to. So this fully insured equivalent is basically what the district budgets toward the teachers, and the fully insured equivalent is what the teachers would pay after district contribution. And so even though the stop loss premium went up by 25%, the employee rates went up by less than 9%. So the stop loss, that's a scary percentage, but it's a smaller portion of what creates our employee rate, so to speak. Other questions? So this breaks it down a little bit more for you too, Bruce. So this is showing our open enrollment recap. So we have a few bullets here discussing our plan offering and contribution changes. So our first bullet shows what we did in 23-24. Our district base plan is the high deductible 2000 plan. And the cost, or the fully insured equivalent, sort of what I was just discussing, that premium is set, or was set at $633. And the district pays $633 to that cost for the employee. So we kept that plan. You see on the next bullet, even though the premium went up, the district was able to absorb that cost and still keep that at a zero cost plan to the employee. Then below that in this chart just shows some of our enrollment migration. We did have a little bit of an adjustment, but in talking with Dennis and Luciano, it seems like it's more because we had more staff join us, rather than really migration from one plan to the other. But as you're looking at this on the far left, it gives you the plan name. So the PPO 750 is our richest plan, PPO 1000, sort of that mid-range, and then the high deductible is our base plan. Again, that the district pays for at 100% at the employee only level. On each of those plans, it outlines the deductible, co-insurance, primary care, and specialist copays, just so you have an idea of how the plans differ. But ultimately, on the far right, you have those two columns that identify how many employees were enrolled in each plan. 5/2024, that's before the open enrollment changes took place, and then 7/2024 was after the open enrollment changes took place. So we didn't, again, see much migration, percentage-wise in either of these plans. It looks, again, like a heavy increase in enrollment on the high deductible plan, but again, the leadership team advised that it was likely due to adding new hires, rather than folks shifting from one plan to the other.
And then making it available to other groups of people throughout the district, so adding more people that are benefit eligible for that number some as well.
So with those numbers then, that on the right hand side columns, is that, but that's not the total number of employees though.
No, I don't know how many we have really waiving. Maybe,
I'd have to look,
yeah.
I'd say That's certainly a majority of them. I'd say probably in the 13 to 1,500 total employee range, so it's more than half of them.
Oh.
But we've got, quite a few who are on a spouse's insurance.
Somebody
or
else's
a different
spouse's.
opportunity, yeah.
So on the one where we pay for the whole thing on the high deductible. If they choose one of the other plans, does what they would have gotten that, for that high deductible go towards that one, or are they paying for the other one out of their pocket?
They're paying the difference. Yeah.
Just the difference.
They'll pay the difference, right? So when we say the district's contributing $734, that contribution applies to any of the plans that they enroll in. Yeah, so they would just pay the difference. The same is true if they enroll dependents, right? The district pays that cost for employees, but if they're enrolling their dependent, they'll pay kind of the difference in that. Any other thoughts or questions, feedback?
One more. What is co-insurance?
Co-insurance is basically the cost sharing between the enrolled person and the insurance plan. So, for example, on each of these plans, you have to satisfy your deductible. So we have our deductible listed here, $750, $1,000, or $2,000. You have that deductible that generally applies to more major services, CT scan, surgery for your wrist, those types of things. And so once the deductible is satisfied, that's the portion that the employee accumulates toward for services. Once it's satisfied, then your co-insurance kicks in, and so any claims above, say this deductible amount, any claims above that is split between the insurer and the employee. And so when we read this as 80/20, that means that 80% of the charges are paid by the insurance company and 20% are paid by the employee or the member.
Okay, but District 1 is the insurance company now, right?
You're right. So that's exactly right. So when I say insurance company, it's the plan or the insurance company are sort of interchangeable in that example I gave.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is there maxes?
There are an additional component to the plan is called an out-of-pocket maximum. And so there's protection so that they're not paying 20% of $1 million. And so that varies by plan as well. Usually it's upwards, at least on an individual side, upwards to $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. But there's that protection in a given plan year too for the district. All runs on a plan year rather than a calendar year. Other questions before we hop into the rate or into the claim information? All right, well, this is our self-funded versus fully insured equivalent pricing. And so we talk about our self-funded costs. As I mentioned, we talk about what we spend on claims and what we spend on our fixed costs, which again include all of our vendor fees, our stop loss vendor, our TPA, our pharmacy, all that good stuff. And so when we talk about our fully insured equivalent, that's saying, what if we weren't the insurance company? To use kind of your example, Bruce, what if we were still just with Aetna directly and they were taking care of everything for us and all the good stuff? And so we do create, as we just described, these rates here. We talked about our 640, 633 and our 740, 34. Those are considered our fully insured equivalent rates. And so those are developed by actuaries to make sure that we're funding the plan accordingly and that we're taking appropriate payroll deductions. So that's our fully insured equivalent cost. So as we're looking at this chart, we've kind of looked at it before. We have our entire plan year now from July 23 through June 24. And in the left columns, we have our total claims. These are actual claims that were paid by the district. And then we have our estimated fixed costs. This is just our average enrollment times our fixed cost, which does not vary throughout the year. So that's kind of our those two columns. And then right in the center there, we have our total SF cost. That's basically just our claims plus our fixed cost. So our total spend for this year was at $8.1 million, where we include our claims and those estimated fixed costs. When we look at our estimated fully insured equivalent cost, that is, again, what could have expected from an insurance company, or the actuaries advised that we should be charging, that would generally account for claims fixed costs as well, if we had stayed under a vendor, rather than go self-funded. And so, in that scenario, we would have spent about $6.8 million. And so the big number to really pay attention to here is on that last column, very bottom, is 119%. That is effectively our loss ratio when we're looking at this analysis. Maybe we would say self-funded, or excuse me, fully insured versus self-funded. So essentially, when we look at this at 119%, that means we ran about 19% hotter than we expected. And again, last year, as you are aware, we had a lot of emerging high-cost claimants. Certainly, as Murphy's Law, as soon as we go self-funded, that happens. But again, we've implemented some cost containment strategies and have a lot of those folks that are case management as well to help, reduce that. But in the meantime, this is how our year wrapped up.
So we actually had a benefit in the first month because it was just, so this is actually a little worse than what it portrays to be, right? Because of how it started.
Right, yeah, you're right. If you remember, for July, it was sort of an immature month, right? So, when we're, this year, when we look at this year's, we won't see that July was, so immature and so small.
Is it just coincidence that the claims for May and June are just so extremely high?
Not coincidence at all. It's very, very common in school districts. That's generally summer break or the beginning of it, and that's when folks are usually getting any planned procedures. Some folks use that timeline for family planning.
Yeah, okay.
If they work in a school district, and so that's pretty typical, is to see May, June, and July as higher months.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I have more fun claims pages, so let's carry on. So this next page is going to go over our claims by plan year. And so this takes into consideration the years that we were fully insured, either with Aetna or with Blue Cross. And so we did run about $350,000 higher in claims this year than we did in our prior year. And so part of that, again, we have a lot of large cost claimants. Cost of care, of course, is going up. But in looking at this, I didn't include this on the slide, I should have, but in looking at this, we averaged out what we would call our cost PEPM, so per employee per month, our claims cost per employee per month over the last 3 years. Surprisingly, if we're looking just at claims cost per employee per month, this year that we just wrapped up, we were actually at $695 per employee per month, compared to 22-23, where we were at $727 per employee per month. So even though our spend was higher, ran a little bit hotter than anticipated, we're definitely, at least that's a silver lining, I will say. Questions on this page? All right. Okay, we were finally able to get some decent data from IMS. We just had a great anecdotal story from Monica about her use of the service today. She actually went to Mexico today to the IMS facility to get care and was very excited about it. Was already feeling better, had already gotten medication and all the things, and so a great testimony for the program. But with this data, this breaks down the service type that folks are receiving when they're using IMS. If you remember, that's our International Medical Solutions program that gives access to care in Mexico. And so we have our number of claims and then the service type. We have paid out total claim spend of just over $35,000 in claims through IMS. As a way to kind of validate this program and show the ROI on this, we put together through the Fair Health Consumer Reporting Program an estimated US cost of those types of services. Obviously, it's generic, right? You go to the emergency room, that can vary greatly, but this is sort of the averages through that consumer report. And had these types of services taken place in the US, we would have likely paid over $100,000 from our plan funds. So definitely shows that there's some return on our investment with working with the IMS. And then today to hear, a really great testimony. We're excited about the program and encourage that people are using it and having some success with it.
So for certain kinds of medical problems, do we direct people to go to Mexico?
Technically, we can't direct them. We can remind them that it's available. But we don't cut out any of our programs and require anybody to go there. But certainly it's something that we've been promoting pretty heavily through the wellness team and the insurance committee, just to try to get folks to be aware of those services there. But nothing is carved out of our plan to make them be required to go there.
But by going to Mexico, we have certain standards that the providers in Mexico must meet. So.
Yes, absolutely. They have to have the same type of credentialing that a US physician has. Alrighty. We've been looking at this all year, so I won't go into too much of the diagnosis issue, but this is our large cost claimants, again, through the entire plan year. This is just the folks who incurred $100,000 of claims or more. I will tell you that we had a hefty list of folks between $40,000 and $100,000. I didn't include them here. I wanted to see the folks who were approaching that $150,000 threshold. So you can see the leading diagnosis on the left side. As we look through the labels at the top, or what TPA paid means is basically what we paid out, what our plan approved and paid. And then we have that ASD applied. So if you remember 2 hours ago when I first started talking, the aggregating specific deductible, that's ASD. So we had a $215,000 aggregating specific deductible for the plan year we just wrapped up. And so this shows the breakdown of how that accumulated across 4 separate large cost claims. And then on the far right is SL reimbursed, is our stop loss reimbursed. So that gives you an idea how much money was reimbursed through the stop loss insurance, and also gives an idea of why we received a 25% increase on our premium, because they ended up paying out on our behalf, or reimbursing us rather, for money we've spent out, over $360,000 for these folks. And I will say that they are still paying out reimbursements for claims for these folks that were incurred prior to the end of that plan year.
We hit the district aggregate this year.
Have we covered this already? So stop loss reimbursed us $362,000. What was the cost for that stop loss insurance? Is it more or less than the 362?
Oh, it certainly is less than the 362. Yeah, I didn't include the actual pricing on here. I can certainly revisit it, and we can have it for our next meeting to talk through what we're paying those vendors. I believe we've talked about it in the springtime with those cost analysis pages, but we can put it together. But certainly it was a savings for them to be able to pay us out on behalf.
But for the stop loss insurance company to make money, so they didn't do so well with us. Hopefully they to stay in business, they're doing better with somebody else.
Exactly. And that is part of why we see an increase in our premiums from them as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And these next couple of pages are really kind of just specific to claims by diagnosis, primarily because this is the information that we use to kind of help inform our wellness program. And so I believe we've looked at this before, but this page here outlines our disease condition by the number of paid claims in the table to the left. The table in the middle breaks down the number of unique claimants by disease condition. And then on the right, which is where I'll basically spend more of the conversation, is the percent of prevalence of the disease condition in District 1 compared to Aetna's entire block of business nationally. So I've highlighted in red the percentages that are higher here at District 1 than they are elsewhere. We're winning in some ways here, but why I call that to attention is you also, if you're kind of glancing through the paid claims and the unique claimants, some of our highest cost paid claims are related to things like hypertension, hyperlipidemia, which is high cholesterol, obesity, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, which is a precursor to diabetes, specifically type 2, and then also anxiety and depression. So again, this information is generally provided so that we can really develop an informed wellness program and advise our folks on how to best get care. That may happen through lifestyle changes or through some of the programs that we have in place like Virta or Renologic to help with some lifestyle coaching that may help kind of slow down these disease processes or at least help improve them. So that's why I share this with you today. Questions, comments, feedback on this one?
So with anxiety and depression, that means the cost of seeing a psychologist or psychiatrist.
It could be that. More often it's medication.
Medications? Yeah.
Yeah, so actually that's a good segue to the next page as it relates to prescriptions. Our prescription costs, our average paid per claim, this is kind of our top prescriptions by unique claimants, and then the highest cost is in the right side there. But most of our expense for prescriptions is actually not related to anxiety and depression, just the two combined happen to create $1 million. That's why if you notice, this chart has 12 because I wanted to include them on the prior page. But as we look at the top prescribed medications, it again is related to primarily hypertension, high cholesterol, those types of drugs.
And then the Ozempic for diabetes?
Yes, our plan is required, our plan is built in such a way that in order to get an Ozempic or a Mounjaro or Trulicity or what have you, you have to have a diagnosis of diabetes. It's not specific to weight loss or just a diagnosis of diabetes, for example, or obesity, for example.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a couple of high cost scripts. Humira, for example, that's for rheumatoid arthritis. We have a couple even for like MS. So those are some of those higher cost prescriptions.
It's like watching TV and seeing all the advertising for all these different drugs.
Yeah. What's interesting is when you, I kind of nerd out on that stuff. So when you really get into the weeds of some of the statistics, Humira, for example, has 4 or 5 other drugs that have almost the same efficacy, but they're not name brand, and so folks won't take them.
Wow.
Yeah, and so our plan is built in such a way that folks are paying a little bit more for a brand name drug if a generic is available, or even now they're creating biosimilars, which are for lack of a better term, a typo generic. And so people do have to pay a little bit more for that, but ultimately, that is a cap for them, right? Say, off the top of my head, let's say it's $200 to the employee, well, the plan still has to pay the balance of that, right? If Humira is charging $3,000 a month for your prescription, and the employee only pays $2,000, the rest of that is not free, right? The plan pays that, and now we are the plan. And so it's interesting that, I think we talked a little bit about this in an earlier meeting, that Aetna, as a whole, has removed Humira because there is a biosimilar available. And so they're kind of pushing to kind of push that along and force that along for folks to be just a little bit better consumers. Anyway, I nerded out, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, it's interesting.
And then this next page is specific to our prescription rebates. So prior to being self-funded, companies like Humira or other, the manufacturers of some of those commercial-based, we'll call them commercial-based prescriptions, the manufacturers will give rebates to plan sponsors when they hit a certain threshold of how many have been prescribed. And so in the fully insured atmosphere, the rebates that they would get back would go directly to our insurance company. Well, now that we are the insurance company, we get that money back. And so this year, we don't have complete data yet, but for this year, we received over $150,000 back in rebates. We're on a pretty aggressive prescription program to where the goal is to decrease the cost at the front end for both the member and the plan. So our rebates will seem less. It's sort of like when we're paying our taxes, right? I'll pay a little bit more now and I get a lesser refund, but maybe I get to keep more upfront, right? So if we wanted to kind of use that analogy, it's sort of like that. But still, not gonna turn our heads to $150,000 in rebate from the pharmacy. Questions on any of that stuff? Any claims, questions?
Do we use just one pharmaceutical company then for everything?
Yeah, so we use the Aetna network, which is technically CVS, but members can access just about every pharmacy. So they can do Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Kroger. They can access just about any pharmacy, but CVS is kind of the preferred pharmacy, and that's technically who we're using, but it's pretty open-ended. Alrighty, and then this last page is just giving you an idea of some of the ways that we're trying to get our folks engaged in benefits, engaged in wellness. We are having professional development days where the vendors are giving periods of time where they can talk to staff to help them learn about their benefits, how to be better consumers, all those good things. We're also having a wellness fair coming up September 9th. If you want to attend, you're more than welcome. Vendors will be there. Community vendors will be there, so it'll be an event where folks can come in and do on-site mammography, they can do biometric screenings. The goal is to kind of get them engaged with the wellness program, and they can do some of those screenings where you do flu shot clinics, all of those things kind of in one place, so that folks are getting their biometrics numbers, learning about their cholesterol or high blood pressure or whatever that may look like on site, and trying to make it a little bit easier for them. So that's coming up. And then just a few other items. The district wellness newsletter has been going out, or will be going out, highlighting certain benefits over time. And again, we'll have vendor webinars throughout the year to keep people, keep benefits in front of them and some of those value add cost containment measures in front of them. And then a monthly program spotlight. So again, say for example, IMS, right? We had a great story about IMS, so eventually we'll spotlight that and hopefully have employee testimonials to help share some of the benefits that we're putting in place that will hopefully save the members money and save the plans money. Questions on anything I just went over?
You were saying we would be eligible to go to the wellness fair?
You can certainly come join in, meet some of the vendors that we partner with. There will be community vendors here too. You're more than welcome to join.
Do I have to show proof of something?
Nope, I'll be there. So when they're trying to pull you out, I'll say, I know him.
Hey, it's all right.
Hi, you okay? No, it's nothing like that, nothing like that. But yeah, you can certainly come in. I'll send you some information on it, or we'll provide it to you before we wrap up today. I'll give you some information on it. Come join us. Yeah. All right, well, that's it for me.
All right, just real quickly on the finance piece, so we did put $7 million into the plan of the district's money to prepay for the 25 year, just to kind of have money in there and prepay the benefits. We do that just in case we need the money set aside for something else, we have it there, so it doesn't affect anyone's benefits. So in years where we can prepay, we try to do that, just so it's already there and available. But with that cash in the bank, we were able to put it into an interest-bearing account, and so that generates roughly $6,000 a month right now. And so with that money, what we're exploring is an additional employee that can be over this whole education aspect of our benefits to try to make it, to try to do the educational piece in a way that we want it done, but it's hard for some of us to add that on to what we're already doing. So we're exploring hiring a full-time employee with that interest that we gain from it in order to be the face of the education, in order to have someone here in the district that people can call and say, if I do this, what happens here? Who do I call for this? Where do I go for that? So we have one person they can reach out to that works for the district. Allison does a great job, but we also feel like having our own employee helps people feel more comfortable being able to call someone that works for the district as well. And so that's something that we're exploring. So I'm just interested to see what your all's thoughts are on that idea.
How is the money invested? Is it a CD?
It's just a really basic interest-bearing
Just interesting.
account, yeah. Yeah. Pretty minimal. I think when we looked at what we could get legally, it was the options at the bank were really
Yeah,
small.
They were limited.
Like
Mhm.
1%, something like that, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty nominal, but, $72,000 could maybe hire us somebody, so with salary and benefits and all that, so we thought that's some good news.
Yeah, that sounds good, to hire someone. What if, okay, we don't have any such person right now,
Mhm.
so what do people do when they have a question right now?
They'll reach out to payroll is one place that they start. Sometimes they reach out to HR to gather information. We answer the basic questions that we can, like what plans do we offer? Here's how to sign up. But when the questions get more detailed in, is this covered? Is that covered? How do I handle this scenario? They're not reimbursing me. My card didn't work. All those types of things go to Allison. So we let her handle those. She knows much more about that than our folks who are doing other things. So the idea is this person could kind of come in and maybe answer some of those internally without them having to reach out to Allison. But there would be a partnership there with that person understanding maybe a little bit more than that base level information to be able to provide support.
I think that's an excellent idea, because it's funny because talking about that, looking at, look at May and beyond. It's like, well, I got this pain in my chest, but I gotta get a couple tests out.
Yeah.
But maybe if I had somebody, or if there's more people exploring that corner, that could cut those costs down. There could be. So education is huge. When I was in a former district, I didn't, and not, now looking at it more from a trust side, but before I didn't take advantage of stuff, and both in financial and health. And it's one of those things where it's like, looking at some of those costs with like diabetes and blood pressure, that education would be great. And I think that's huge, because a lot of times, we do seek guidance. People, hey, who's a good doctor you got, or this or that, because I myself am doctor shopping, and it's like, well, I'd rather get somebody that's in our network to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where it's like, well, who is the proper number to call? Who is the best on that? So that's as an employee in this, that's huge. I would love to see that go through, because, I can help you with your homework, but only go so far.
All right, good deal. I appreciate the feedback. So that's definitely something we're going to explore a little bit more heavily as we move forward to see what we can put in place there. And then the only other thing was Allison talked about a 9% rate increase. We increased our contribution 9%, but the rest of the plan's a little bit less than that. So the gap between what we provided and what it costs to buy up into the other plans shrunk just a little bit. It wasn't a huge amount, we're not talking about $100, but maybe tens of dollars, but it was a step towards trying to make it a little bit more affordable for our employees to add the family piece, or for our employees to add children, that kind of thing. So that gap closed just a little bit based on the percentage increases we put on the different plans. Any thoughts or questions on that? All right. Well, as a district, financially, we're in a good place. So we don't foresee any issues, this year with the plan or being able to keep things going. Based on the way the year finished, we are preparing ourselves mentally for a higher rate increase moving into next year's budget as we look at the whole compensation package for our employees. So we anticipate probably coming in higher than 9%, but we'll know more as we get closer into February, March, what we can kind of dial in on that. All right. Any more questions?
So looking at the big picture, for the first year of being self-insured, can we say to what extent the district is better off financially than it would have been under the former plan?
I think, so Allison could speak a little bit closer to probably what we might guess our rate increase could have been if we were fully insured. She's got more numbers from other organizations on exactly what that might look like.
I think if we grab that self-funded versus the affiliated.
Right. I figured it's buried in there somewhere.
Yeah, so this is kind of what would answer that question.
Yeah.
So, for example, if we, basically we could say simple math, right? And this chart itself is not scientific, but what we could say is, because our loss ratio was at about 119%, you could say that we budgeted 20% less than we should have because of those large cost claimants. And so what we're seeing in the market at the same renewal for districts, the same renewal period, was for any of our clients who had 100% or more loss ratio, we were seeing anywhere between 14 to 17% increases. And so I spoke a little bit about those statewide trusts that have multiple district entities. They are, very large pools, right? We have our 900 people, but each of those pools have multiple tens of thousands of people in their pool. And so their rate increases are going to be a little bit less than a smaller population compared to like ours. This is not a small population, but compared to that. And so we saw them come across anywhere from 7 to 14%. But when we're seeing a loss ratio like that, we're just comparing that to our fully insured equivalent. We would say we would have expected at least a 20% increase based on that.
Out of curiosity, I don't know if this is it safe to say for a first year self-funded, we had a pretty good step level? Okay, this trend, it might hurt on that first initial step, but that's not bad. That's what a lot of people kind of see. Because first years are the rocky ones, the hard ones. And we didn't hit too hard.
Yeah. Well, especially because, we did have what they call emerging high cost claimants. And so we go through multiple stages of underwriting, multiple years of feasibility studies to make sure that it's appropriate, right? And so when the time came and, said, okay, go on green, it was like literally 1 month in, a bunch of people suddenly were diagnosed with major things, or major injuries, or what have you, right? And so to say that was sort of that, like you said, kind of like, oh, here we go, of course, because we're self-funded. It's unfortunately not atypical, and given all of the planning that went into it, it's almost laughable because of all of the years of planning to do it, and the strategy, and the caution, and all of the actuarial review. So for those folks to kind of pop up like, oh gosh. So given that they showed up out of nowhere, yes, I think we're doing all right.
So if you're in a district with a very large pool of employees versus a small one, the large pool is gonna have the advantage because those high costs by the small number of people who have extraordinary medical problems, it can be absorbed better, maybe that's not the right word.
Yeah, it kind of spreads the risk.
Yeah,
Right, yeah, kind of spreads the risk, because, you know, you're not going to have a year where all 800 of our folks get really sick. But if we, looking at our large cost claimant list of how many ever people there were, 10 or 12, and over 100,000, if we had a population of 25 people and 10 of them were on that high cost claimant list, that would be devastating to a plan.
Right.
But because we are bigger, it
Right.
helps to kind of absorb that.
Right.
And so it's, you know, economy of the scale in some aspect.
Right.
Other thoughts, questions? All right.
Yeah. Along that same line, bigger is advantageous. Could our district combine with other districts so that our pool is larger?
We could, we were in a consortium with other institutions previously, but we decided to leave based on some of the way it was structured. We feel like being self-insured or self-funded this way allows us the flexibility to do what's best for us. Whereas when we were with other organizations, we all had to vote, and if what was best for us isn't what was best for everyone else, we didn't get what was best for us. And so we feel like our pool is large enough on its own that we don't need to spread the risk anymore. And then we still have a significant amount of flexibility. Like when we added Renal Logic, that took months. Whereas if we were a larger pool, it would have been probably a whole plan year to go through and vet it, and everyone has to go back to their team and make a decision. So the flexibility is really beneficial for us in this setup. Yeah.
But as time goes on, that we expect, maybe, I don't know if expectation, that being self-insured is going to be beneficial.
Yes, I think it was this year alone, just because the rate increase that we would have seen versus what we had to, the 9 versus the 20 it could have been, was
Yeah.
substantial, but then it also gives us a chance to do the things we want to do with our benefits, like make it more affordable for families, offer additional pieces that make it better, a richer benefit at the same cost, or maybe a richer benefit at an even cheaper price for our employees. So yeah, we definitely see, 10 years from now, we'll be glad we did this. We had the money now to weather a storm like this, so it made sense to jump in now when we can navigate these kind of anomalies that won't happen every year. So 10 years from now, it should be a lot easier.
And hopefully an increase in the employee education.
Yep.
Even if there's gonna be some big things that pop up, but hopefully a lot of the smaller ones won't be as much as they were, and it can help with other things. The education could be huge.
Yeah. I will say, I consult for a lot of school districts, and District 1 is the best at communicating benefits and trying to educate staff on benefits, of course, but it seems like on all things. There's a level of transparency and openness there that really allows for employee buy-in. And so we're hoping, especially this year with kind of a year under us, to be able to really get that buy-in even more for staff. That District 1's, I can say for sure, above and beyond in that regard. For whatever that's worth.
It's what you see.
It's just my opinion.
Community.
I know, right?
It'll really speak to that, those testimonials, because I was chatting with this coworker, and, he was, he knows I working with this stuff, and he was like, he's real appreciative of what's coming and what's seeing there, having those freedoms. And I myself, it's having been in a self-funded like this, it is nice, you do have benefits and having those, because the trickles to the trust, trickle to the employee, and that's huge. And, I think you do, when you have a little bit more control of your destiny, it's a lot better, as opposed to, well, this is what everybody goes through.
Yeah.
Nope, we don't want to be in that line. So I was thinking that too, maybe partnering up, but then that's right, it would come more to a vote where it's like, well, this is our benefit, but it doesn't help you.
Right.
Then you also absorb their risk.
Yeah.
So if
Right.
they're having issues, that's
Yeah.
water in the boat.
That's a really good point, and especially
Yeah.
a district your size, you could make your pool population larger by combining with a trust, but a district your size, you're one of the largest, especially in this area. And so if others are coming along, more often than not, the larger guy is subsidizing the smaller, so it's another thing that we saw in that, with the consortium.
And we've explored bringing more into the self-funded insurance thing, like not just medical, maybe we look at dental, vision as being parts of it. I mean, there are districts throughout the state who have, who self-fund or self-insure themselves on, like workers' comp insurance and casualty loss insurance. So there are things we can do where we might be able to self-insure everything, right? That's a possibility, but this is where we wanted to start, and our main focus is making the medical piece a really rich benefit for our folks.
Great question.
Then I guess, that sounds good with item for the presentations, and I guess I'll move us to the next bit. And, so we're looking for the good of the orders, any shout outs or items of that business?
I already gave my shout out.
With paperwork and pictures too. It's gonna be a tough act to follow. All right. Looks like then if we have none at this time, so just some friendly reminders then, our upcoming future meeting, we are looking at November 14th of this year. And, so check your Google calendars, all that fun stuff. And, if we are okay with it, I guess we can start moving to adjournment, so. I don't know if I gotta ask for that one. Yeah, okay, so, can we get a call to adjourn the meeting?
Yes.
All right, second? All right. I guess I gotta make it official, yeah, here we go.
Boom,
All
well done,
right.
sir.